Okay people, Jujutsu Kaisen and Gege Akutami are determined to keep Satoru Gojo stuck in a box. Yeah, the box. And with the big reveal from chapter 199, it's about to make everyone lose their frickin' minds. Especially after you hear what I'm about to say regarding the truth of Sukuna, the Disgraced One. As of chapter 199 of Jujutsu Kaisen, it's been 109 chapters since Satoru Gojo was sealed within the Prism Realm at the hands of Kenjaku, and I'm sure Gege Akutami is very happy about that. I mean, fam, can you imagine how hard it is for Gege to figure out a way to beat Gojo, or at the very least remove him from missions? Dog, he's super OP. Removing Gojo from the series, whilst definitely was disappointing as a fan of the character, it allowed for Kenjaku to further his plans post Shibuya and also made the situation a lot more dire. Nothing different from Saitama going to get groceries whilst pro heroes are getting beat within an inch of their life in One Punch Man. Except, well, I guess the supermarket would be the Prism Realm. And in the latest chapter 199, Yuji and Megumi finally meet with the angel Hana, who has the technique capable of removing the seal on the Prism Realm that could essentially free Gojo. However, the angel drops the ultimate task in order to get them to do it. In order to remove the seal, they ask that first they quote-unquote butcher one player in particular, and they won't hesitate to help removing the seal. That player being the quote-unquote disgraced one. Overhearing the matter, Sukuna approaches Yuji, revealing that he's in fact the one that Hana once dealt with, which means, yeah, Gojo is absolutely screwed, boys. Pack it up. And with Yuji and Sukuna's lives being linked, basically, in order to free Gojo, Yuji would have to bite the big one. But then that begs the question, why does the angel want Sukuna to be destroyed? From the beginning of the series, we've learned that Sukuna has made several enemies and some allies during his time alive, and even following that, the myth of Sukuna and his carnage created vendettas amongst other sorcerers who either seek to challenge him or have a personal axe to grind. In chapter 187, we've seen the likes of the sorcerer Kashimo via a flashback seeking to fight the strongest sorcerer known, and during his conversation with Kenjaku, he was told it was Sukuna from 600 years ago. So it's not too out the realm to assume that the angel could simply have gripes with Sukuna based off the legends they were told, although based on the manner the angel presented the trade regarding butchering the disgraced one, relax Dexter, get back to being a lumberjack. It sounds a lot more personal than just someone who heard of folklore. It sounds like the angel may have connections to Sukuna from his time of being a sorcerer over 1,000 years ago. I mean, fam, for crying out loud, the angel was already mentioned in chapter 145 to have been alive 1,000 years ago via the conversation with Tengen, so yeah, you could kind of put 1 + 1. Now, from everything we know up until this point regarding Ryomen Sukuna, the king of curses, and his mysterious dark past, we know he's essentially the quote-unquote Voldemort of Jujutsu Kaisen. He was a human sorcerer who was known as the imaginary demon over 1,000 years ago and was defeated by a group of sorcerers. And of course, following his death, he became a cursed spirit whose body was too strong to completely destroy, so they scattered his 20 indestructible fingers. But before all that happened, you gotta ask, who was the man before becoming the king of curses? In case you didn't know, Sukuna's name is based off a figure from Japanese mythology who shared the same name and was said to have appeared around the 4th century. He was described as a man of inhuman strength with a 2-faced head plus a total of 8 limbs, 4 arms, and legs respectively that served each face. Kind of pretty similar to the design shown on the cover of chapter 117, and he was wielding of course a multitude of weapons in many hands, and he terrorized village after village in ancient Hida, plundering and leaving chaos in his wake. That is until a brave military commander dispatched by the imperial court named Takefurukuma no Mikoto stepped forth and put an end to the monster's tyranny. I'm willing to bet that there's somebody in Jujutsu Kaisen that plays that role, and I'm not going to steer away from pointing the fingers at a certain Megumi Fushiguro. And based on everything we know thus far regarding Hana and her abilities, we know the reason Yuji and Megumi sought after her are for her technique that allows her to extinguish any other curse techniques. And based on that knowledge, it definitely begs to question, if she's capable of such a feat, why doesn't she simply take on Sukuna's host herself, considering she would ideally be able to vanquish him once and for all? But even more so, if she's had that ability going back to the days of Sukuna's reign of terror, why didn't she simply execute the remainder of Sukuna's body to rid the world of the Cursed King once and for all? And that's simple actually. She can't. Like we already stated, Sukuna's body was so abnormally powerful that despite all the previous sorcerers from the past working in unison, they weren't able to destroy Sukuna's 20 fingers, and thus they had to spread them in different locations in order to make sure Sukuna wouldn't be able to return. Still, there were sorcerers strong enough to destroy the other parts of Sukuna's body, and if you factor in the angel's special curse technique and her being around during the time Sukuna was defeated, you can assume the angel may have had a hand in destroying the other parts of his body using her ability. Taking it a step further, Hana was also seen during the culling games rescuing Megumi Fushiguro while he was unconscious, despite not having any prior engagements with him. Sukuna has been shown in the past to have a vested interest in Megumi for currently unknown reasons, and if Hana personally saved Megumi, you can assume it would have been out of spite to Sukuna, thus having an idea of what Sukuna's reasoning behind being so interested in Megumi actually is. But still, that doesn't completely explain what's the angel's motives behind specifically going after Sukuna and clearly holding a personal vendetta against him. As we mentioned before, Sukuna not only made enemies during his time, but also seems to have made an ally or two along the way, based on his relationship he was shown to have with Urame. Whilst Urame's loyalties are not concrete, seemingly playing at having alliances with both Kenjaku and Sukuna, there's definitely more to their relationship than we've seen so far. Sukuna's been shown to have admiration for very few people and curses throughout the series. However, when it comes to Urame, he acknowledges them and doesn't do so in his normal condescending manner. Like, you know, when he was basically crapping on most of the people we've seen in the past, except maybe like Jogo. He kind of gave him some props, so kudos to Jogo. Again, we can assume there's a possibility during his war against the world of sorcerers 1,000 years ago, Sukuna may have had help. Following the events of chapter 187 of Jujutsu Kaisen, with the flashback of Kashimo's conversation with Kenjaku, and prior to resuming the battle with Hakari, Gege released a special sheet of lyrics from a song called Admiring You. You always exaggerate. The local udon noodles aren't as tasty as you say, the neighborhood dog isn't as big as you say, and I'm not as cute as you say. When you vowed to hate me forever, you were exaggerating to the end, but it might actually be true. Each night in the bath, I think of that moment 8 years ago, and your verbal slip. What a hairy back. What a hairy back. Everyone always exaggerates, like even if you don't find love, lose that hair, or change jobs, things will work out. But what if they don't? Sometimes I also exaggerate, like I don't worry about my makeup and fake tears relieve the pain. Talking about makeup, I'm still gonna stand by that Gege Akutami could very well be a female, but that's a side note. Now I'm getting off at the next station, alone. So those song lyrics allude to a disappointing lover or friend that is unhappy with the status of their current relationship. Why would Gege include this sheet of lyrics right after a flashback referencing another person who's had some sort of dealings or past with Sukuna, unless there's more of a connection than we're aware of? In fact, so far we've learned that there's actually a few people who in one form or another have previous gripes with Sukuna or past with him, including Hana Kurosuru, Kashimo, and Urame. Not to mention, of course, Kenjaku, although I don't think Kenjaku has the same connection with him as these other people. I mean, Kenjaku's kind of like Batman. He's on his own with this one. And of those people, the only one known to still be at the very least cordial with Sukuna is Urame, which leads me to believe Sukuna at one point or another may have had a group that followed him, but ultimately might have betrayed him during his battle as a human sorcerer, or once he returned as a cursed spirit. Again, maybe minus Urame, considering there's still some sort of relationship there. And I mean, Kashimo wanting a battle and Hana wanting him butchered is a bit of a dead giveaway, no? And to add on to even more of the dynamic between Sukuna and Urame's relationship, there was a character bio that was released for Urame that gave us some details regarding their relationship with Sukuna. Someone asked, is Urame a chef? And they replied, Sukuna also eats people, but it's hard to cook them. And while there are a few people who have such experience, Urame excels in that ability. Another question asked, how long has Urame been with Sukuna? From 1,000 years ago. Urame was allowed to stand next to Sukuna because they could cook delicious food. Of course, it's also because they are Jujutsu sorcerer. So with Hana's abilities to vanquish curse techniques, she may have been the one to inevitably help destroy Sukuna, as well as his cursed ligaments, except the fingers, that couldn't be extinguished, and thus took up the identity as the self-proclaimed angel, awaiting the day Sukuna would return once more to put down her former lord. And I mean, going back to the poem Gege released, considering the timing as well, that it was released shortly after a flashback referencing Sukuna, it's not a far stretch to say that Hana and Sukuna may have even been lovers at a given point, but in his reign of terror, his actions possibly going beyond acceptable in Hana's book, thus pushing her to side with his enemies in his final days before being completely scattered, until of course Yuji would eat one of his fingers, thus bringing us to current time of the series. It seems the culling game has not only been by Kenjaku's design, but also a gathering of former sorcerers who are using the opportunity to rid the world of Sukuna, which would also align with Kenjaku's plans at the same time, thus becoming the final battle of the series and potentially Sukuna's final play at Resurrection. Because to even understand Sukuna's past, you have to take into account what his overall objective has been so far during the series. Especially even from the start, at every opportunity, Sukuna has tried to take control of Yuji's body, even going back to when we very first seen him in his battle against Satoru Gojo at the very start. Now, it could be as simple as Sukuna just wants to resurrect to carry on his reign of terror in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, but possibly it could be more complex than a simple madman. After awakening from being unconscious from his battle, Megumi is greeted by Hana the angel, and specifically she refers to him as the Destined One. So if Megumi is the Destined One, and she later on in the chapter refers to Sukuna as the Disgraced One, there's a piece of the puzzle that's missing in order to understand the full picture. As we mentioned earlier, Sukuna has several times now hinted towards having an interest in Megumi, including referring to him as a wasted treasure. Between the fact that several sorcerers have been brought back from the past for the culling game, and Sukuna almost from the very beginning made mentions of, in particular, Megumi's Shikigami abilities, it begs to question if there's more to Sukuna and Megumi's dynamic that we're simply unaware of. And so based on all the evidence we've gathered thus far within this video, it's safe to assume that at some given point, whether it be 1,000 years ago in the past or in his passing, Sukuna may have had some sort of interactions with someone that either resembled or used similar techniques as Megumi Fushiguro. If Sukuna had help in the past and an inner circle, then there's a high probability that either Sukuna himself was able to wield it or somebody within his inner circle was using the Shikigami powers, and there's a high probability that, considering the fact that the Culling games has had multiple players come back from the past and basically somewhat of the concept of reincarnation, Megumi possibly is somewhat of a reincarnation of somebody from Sukuna's dealings in his time of terror.
Well, now that you mention it, Fushiguro's always ticked off.
Demon dogs!
And with the titles that Hana has been passing out, like if there can be, then possibly one of those titles regarding the Destined one with Megumi is potentially Megumi is the Destined one to stop Sukuna. Because Sukuna's past is shrouded in mystery, we can't say for certain who it was that took him down in the end, but there's a high probability that Megumi's Shikigami powers was either the one to take Sukuna down, or possibly even someone from his inner circle that utilized that capability to resurrect Sukuna when he was initially reborn as a cursed spirit.
Yay! I was scared! I thought you were dead for sure! Thank God!
In the past, obviously, some sorcerer was the one that was the nail in the coffin to Sukuna and brought down his life, and if Megumi is that person or was that person in a previous life, then Sukuna might be trying to obtain that technique or simply rid the world of the one person that stopped him in his previous life, while Hana is trying to utilize that person to once again bring Sukuna down. Because Sukuna has already referenced that he does have plans of his own, although they haven't been explicitly stated. He has a goal and an objective, and it might be outside of even just simply being reborn. And also it doesn't help the fact that Kenjaku has been pretty much removing anybody that could stop Sukuna in his tracks, a la, again, our boy Gojo, RIP in that box. Well, not RIP, but you get what I mean. Making it even easier for when Sukuna ultimately returns, he won't be stopped. And that also adds another potential extra layer into Kenjaku's plans and goals. Because I'd imagine that while Kenjaku isn't by any means a good person, ultimately he doesn't want to be slain by Sukuna either. But of course, Kenjaku hasn't been shown to be a servant of Sukuna or even his goals having Sukuna in mind, so there's also another piece of the puzzle that's missing as well. And it could be as simple as Kenjaku is just a third party that wants his own objective and goals to move forward, and Sukuna is something that he will have to stop down the road. Unless Kenjaku's ultimate goal is the destruction of the sorcery world with Sukuna in mind, and basically he's utilizing the culling game in order to remove any possible threats moving forward that would be able to stop Sukuna once he's reborn. And going back into the relationship between Sukuna and people like Hana the Angel, in chapter 199, the symbiotic being that's within her body attempted to respond to Megumi's questioning of, so why did you help me back in Tokyo #1, with, to answer your question, the reason Hana saved you is because you previously, what? Could possibly be that there was some sort of weird love triangle in the past between Sukuna, Megumi, and Hana, but also could be hinting at he previously was the one that slayed Sukuna in the past. Now granted, Hana looked a little bit embarrassed, so there's more to it than just simply, hey, you're the dude that took down the bad guy. But it's not completely out of the question, considering his lineage, his connections, of course, with his father Toji, that Megumi is the one. Because the way Jujutsu Kaisen has been set up from the very beginning is that each character, especially within the main fray, have certain objectives. While Yuji is essentially the vessel, the container of the ultimate evil, Megumi has seemingly been set up to be the guy that is going to stop the ultimate evil. And considering Megumi has come a long way since the very beginning, where he pretty much couldn't do anything against Sukuna, he's still not quite there yet to be able to take him down, but there's a possibility that within his arsenal, as he continues to grow and thrive in his powers, he might have some capability that is the ultimate checkmate to stopping Sukuna, but if in the wrong hands, could help him to be reborn. Because who's to say that the only way to resurrect Sukuna would be for Yuji to eat all 20 fingers? There could be more to it, or even with eating all 20 fingers, there still might be an extra layer that is missing in order to completely bring him back to prominence the way he was. Taking it even a step further, if you analyze closely what that symbiotic figure that is on Hana's hand said regarding most of them do it by suppressing the vessel's original owner, whether internally or subconsciously, and that's against God's law, so it's wrong. And when Megumi questions God, the hand simply says, that's just a name I give to my beliefs, pay it no mind. Again, a lot of secrecy being shrouded amongst the angel in that form. It's safe to say that there's more to it than meets the eye, and potentially there was a person that rebelled against Sukuna, and maybe they even referred to that person as God because they were so strong. They were strong enough to take down the ultimate evil, Sukuna. They worshipped him. And then Sukuna being referred to as the Disgraced one. That could be a simple title that the angel is giving to him simply because, hey, it's kind of a bit of a disgrace in the Jujutsu sorcery world to, you know, go against everybody and start slaughtering people on some Voldemort, Harry Potter vibes. Or it could be simple as Sukuna was the one to take down this said God that was referenced by this symbiotic form. But let me know what you guys think. What do you think about the Disgraced one, Sukuna? Do you think Megumi is a reincarnation of somebody from the past of 1,000 years ago? And your overall thoughts and expectations. I'm ForneverWorld, and as always, people, have an awesome day. Subscribe and hit that bell.